We live in interesting times for the headlines. 15 more people have died from the virus in China as the country celebrates its Lunar New Year. Hong Kong declared a new coronavirus outbreak as an emergency, the city's highest warning tier, as authorities ramped up measures to reduce the risk of further infections. A powerful earthquake has killed at least 21 people and injured more than 1,000 in eastern Turkey as rescue teams search through the rubble of collapsed buildings for survivors on Saturday. And the Pentagon has said that 34 U.S. troops were diagnosed with traumatic brain injuries following an Iranian attack on their base in Iraq. I'm Alma Angeles, wherever you're watching from around the world. Thank you very much for joining us, and now to the news. A deadly viral outbreak in China has now killed 41 people, while the number of infected cases has soared to nearly 1,300 according to authorities. The Hubei Health Commission said the 15 new deaths all took place in Wuhan, the city of 11 million where the deadly respiratory contagion first emerged. At least 444 new cases of the virus have been found, raising the total number to 1,287, according to the National Health Commission in a separate statement. The disease has spread to 30 provinces, autonomous regions, and municipalities. Wuhan and 13 other cities in Hubei have been locked down in an unprecedented quarantine effort aimed at containing the deadly respiratory contagion, which has spread to several other countries. Around 41 million people are now under lockdown in more than a dozen cities in China as the coronavirus crisis grows. Parts of the Great Wall and Disney in Shanghai are now closed. China is also increasing its containment efforts by building a hospital in the next week near the epicenter. The Hubei Health Commission also reported 180 new cases overall in the province, 77 of them in Wuhan, but the bulk of the rest spread out across the lockdown smaller cities. There are now 729 cases in Hubei alone. The commission also said several of those cities were reporting their first cases of the pathogen 2019 novel coronavirus 2019 nCoV. Meanwhile, Macau's Health Bureau confirmed that a second case of viral pneumonia linked to the newly identified coronavirus reported in mainland China. Soon afterwards, the city's authorities announced they were canceling this year's Chinese New Year celebrations. From our EBC Bureau in Macau, here's Kit Wong.
This Chinese New Year celebration, Macau government announced that all public activities will be cancelled.
Since its first of two confirmed cases of Wuhan coronavirus, the Macau government has tightened temperature screening measures at border checkpoints, in casinos and around the city. The government has also issued prevention guidelines to schools and other social service institutions. The outbreak has caused a shortage of masks and sanitary products in the city. Citizens and visitors queue up to purchase, and many shops and pharmacies are reported to be out of stock.
Locals are lining up to buy their masks from every pharmacy.
Sa Wuhan virus po, ito po ay nakakahawang sakit at talagang higpit na po ng gobyerno ng Macau ukol dito. At kami po bilang paghahanda at pag-iingat sa aming sarili, kami po ay laging nakasuot ng mask at iniiwasan po namin pumunta sa mga public places at lagi po kaming naghuhugas ng kamay at nagsasanitize po kami tuwing nandoon na po kami sa aming mga tahanan.
Okay, we are in line of buying the mask because now is closing in the pharmacy. My boss asked me to line up to buy some masks because they are a little bit afraid about the situation here in Macau. But for me, I think it's not really that dangerous because in the news I heard that the woman infected, that here already in Macau is already in the hospital, so I think it's a little bit okay now.
就是对这个冠状病毒还是有一点担心，因为毕竟家人啊，然后全中国的人这些，然后健康这个问题还是很重要的。就是我们出门在外呢，就是我们尽量都戴上口罩，然后以防就是在空气当中相互传染哈，就是我们就尽量就是说少到人群集中的地方去，都做好防范，戴上口罩，然后勤洗手，吃东西之前。
对对。哪里从哪里来的？
我是从昆明。
昆明啊？
对。
很远啊。
对，因为我回去我们还要经过那个成都那边比较多嘛，所以说都比较担心。我们出来就是说这个也做得比较好一点。
The Macau government has ordered 20 million surgical masks that will be released in a rational system in which locals can each buy a maximum of 10 masks every 10 days at designated pharmacies upon presentation of their Macau ID card starting Thursday night. The Macau government has cancelled all public festivities and celebrations for Chinese New Year, and the resuming of school has also been postponed from February 4 to February 10.
From Macau, reporting for Eagle News, this is Kit Wong, and I am always one with 25.
Thank you, Kit, and do take care over there. China has quarantined cities and shut major tourist attractions from Disneyland to the Forbidden City and a section of the Great Wall as it scrambles to stop the deadly SARS-like virus from spreading further. Here is a rundown of the measures taken so far in an unprecedented quarantine effort. Now, public transport has been stopped in more than 30 cities in central Hubei province, with train stations shut, events canceled, and theaters, libraries, and karaoke bars closed in some locations. The epicenter of the outbreak is provincial capital Wuhan, the biggest city on lockdown, where the government has halted all travel out of the Yangtze River metropolis of 11 million. Wuhan and Beijing have canceled public events that usually attract hundreds of thousands of people to temples during the New Year holiday. Gao Fu, head of the Chinese Center for Disease Control and Prevention, has asked China's 1.4 billion citizens to forgo New Year gatherings and continue themselves at home until all is clear. Now, to discourage nationwide travel, the government also said all tickets for rail, air, road, or water transport could be refunded. Similar quarantine measures are being taken in other smaller cities, and these include strict controls on weddings and funerals, temperature screening of people as they arrive, and the suspension of online taxi services. More than 41 million people in total are affected by the city shutdowns. Meanwhile, three cases of the coronavirus have been confirmed in France, the first in Europe, according to officials. The first case involved a patient in hospital in the southwestern city of Bordeaux, while the other was in Paris. French Health Minister Agnès Buzyn told reporters. A third person, who is a close relative of one of the other two, has also been confirmed to have the virus, according to the health ministry. All three had recently traveled to China and had now been placed in isolation. The minister says it's possible that there are other cases in Europe.
Nous allons mettre tout en œuvre aujourd'hui pour circonscrire cette épidémie, sachant qu'il est possible, voire probable, qu'il y ait d'autres cas, notamment en Europe. Parce que ce n'est pas parce qu'il n'y a pas d'autres cas repérés aujourd'hui qu'il n'y a pas d'autres cas qui circulent.
A woman in Chicago in her 60s was Friday confirmed as the second patient in U.S. soil infected with a deadly new virus originating in China, according to health officials, with 50 other suspected cases under investigation. Let's listen in.
The patient is a woman in her 60s. Most importantly, I'm pleased to report that she is clinically doing well and is in stable condition. She traveled to Wuhan, China in late December and returned to the U.S. on January 13th. A few days after arriving home, the patient began to feel unwell. The patient has been very helpful as we've been gathering information about her contacts in recent days. She was not symptomatic when flying. And based on what we know now about this virus, our concern for transmission before symptoms develop is low, so that is reassuring. She has limited close contacts, all of whom are currently well and who will be monitored closely for symptoms. We will also be monitoring the healthcare workers who have cared for and continue to care for this patient. That this is a single travel-associated case, not a local emergency. We obviously take emerging viruses very seriously, and there are still many unanswered questions about this novel virus. But I can reassure you that even with this Chicago case, the health risk to the general public from novel coronavirus remains low at this time, both nationally and in Chicago. Thank you, Rich. Good morning,
Wang Yanhong and her husband prepared a family feast for their New Year's celebrations, but only two were eating this year in their apartment in the virus-stricken city of Wuhan. Let's take a look.
新年快乐！藕夹，这是中国人武汉。新型冠状病毒感染肺炎疫情和近距离的密切接触传播。对医务工作者提示大家，走亲访友，拜年呐、跟长辈拜年呐、到亲戚家去拜年呐、那都是热热闹闹的。现在今年这个特殊情况就不能到处走了，只能在家里过年了。
我们中国孩子才是一个我们都住在北京，
不会污染其他物体表面，因此特别强调。
有生病的人，他们就是我觉得我们身体很健康就是最好的啦。 真的是，我们是很幸运的，觉得我们是很幸运的。这是毛主席。
Meanwhile, the 5-year-old Chinese national in Cebu, who was being observed by health officials for showing signs of the 2019 novel coronavirus, or 2019 nCoV, was found negative of the deadly disease that has affected Wuhan, China. In a Facebook post, the World Health Organization said test results from the laboratory in Australia, where the child swab samples were sent, showed that the young patient had not contracted the virus. The child from Wuhan, China traveled to Cebu with his mother on January 12 via the Mactan Cebu International Airport. He was immediately brought to a hospital 3 hours upon arrival for experiencing respiratory symptoms. Now, the confirmatory test results from Australia finally put to rest the days of jitter with regard to the prevention of tourist entry. Garcia also said she wants to discuss with the officials steps to strengthen preventive measures against the disease while giving consideration to the country's international relations. And Australia confirmed today its first 4 cases of the new coronavirus that has claimed 41 lives in China, becoming the latest country in a growing list to be affected by the illness. One man was being treated in isolation after arriving in Melbourne a week ago from the Chinese city of Wuhan, the epicenter of the outbreak. He has pneumonia but is in a stable condition, according to health officials. 3 other men in Sydney who also arrived recently from China had tested positive for the disease and were in isolation in local hospitals. They are not particularly unwell, New South Wales State Chief Health Officer Kerry Chant told a press conference. She said public health officials had managed to track most of the people who had been with 2 of the men on their flights from China, and none were showing symptoms of the illness. Officials are also trying to trace the travel of the other man and are waiting on test results from several other people suspected of contracting the disease. And health officials in Nepal on Friday confirmed that a student who returned from Wuhan, China tested positive for the new coronavirus, becoming the first South Asian country to report the deadly disease. Hospital spokesperson Anup Bastola said that the 32-year-old student arrived in Nepal on January 9 and entered the Sukraraj Tropical and Infectious Disease Hospital in Kathmandu 4 days later after running a fever and reporting trouble breathing. Officials said they are monitoring the patient and that he and his family members are healthy. So are all the health workers in the hospital. Nepal's health ministry also said in a statement that surveillance has been increased at the airport and suspicious patients entering Nepal are being monitored with correct manpower and equipment. And Hong Kong on Saturday declared a new coronavirus outbreak as an emergency. That is according to the city's highest warning tier, as authorities ramped up measures to reduce the risk of further infections.
We have been putting ourselves on a very highly...
The announcement came as city leader Carrie Lam faced criticism in some quarters over her administration's response to the crisis. Of the 5 people who have tested positive for the virus in Hong Kong so far, 4 arrived via a newly built high-speed train terminal which connects with the mainland. That led to calls from some medical experts and politicians to limit or even halt arrivals from China, the epicenter of the outbreak. With 41, Hong Kong will now need to sign health declaration forms, she said, while public events including a New Year gala and next month's marathon would also be called off. Meanwhile, clinical trials for a vaccine against the new virus sweeping China could be carried out in the summer. The head of an anti-epidemic coalition said, as different companies announce research into the disease. Stefan Bancel, chief executive of U.S. biotech firm Moderna, says his company plans to develop a vaccine against the new virus sweeping China at its plant in Boston.
There are a few things. I think the governments and different agencies have learned from every one of those, epidemic, Ebola, Zika, the H1N1, SARS. And so I think every time the world is getting more prepared. There's a lot of work happening every time between those pandemics to just get more and more prepared. The beauty of using genetic information and messenger RNA to make a vaccine is the speed. Traditional technology will take a very long time because you have to grow proteins in cells. And growing cells just take time in labs and in factories. In our case, we don't grow cells. We just use genetic information coming from the sequence of a virus, and then for those 4 letters of life, we make in our factory the product, which is exactly the same manufacturing process that we use for Zika vaccine, which is now in clinical trial. Coronavirus is a messenger RNA virus, and so basically you put a sample of a virus in China in a machine that's going to read all the letters that code the instructions for all the protein of a virus. That instruction then can be sent, because it's just data, over the internet in a file that then you can open on a computer and read that instruction and then decide how do we design the vaccine that we are currently making in our factory in Boston.
And the news continues here on Eagle News. We'll be right back.
Visiting the Philippines, Manila or Quezon City is a popular destination. But oftentimes the hustle and bustle of the city can be more stressful on your vacation. So when you feel the need to reconnect to nature or relax again, there's a beautiful oasis just outside of the city called the Garden at Ciudad de Victoria. species that you can see here include hydrangea, snapdragon, and stargazers. They're truly beautiful. The gardens at Ciudad de Victoria are so peaceful, tranquil, and beautiful that it's become a haven for young couples and a very popular venue for engagement photos. The next time you want an escape from the big city, the garden at Ciudad de Victoria is a wonderful place to visit.
Welcome back. A powerful earthquake has killed at least 20 people and injured more than 1,000 in eastern Turkey. Rescue teams are searching through the rubble of collapsed buildings for survivors. Take a look. At least 30 people were reported missing following the magnitude 6.8 quake on Friday night, which had its epicenter in the small lakeside town of Ciudad in the eastern province of Elazig. President Recep Tayyip Erdogan said all steps were being taken to aid people affected by the quake, which caused widespread fear. The Turkish government's Disaster and Emergency Management Agency said the quake hit Sivris at around 8:55 p.m. local time. Turkey lies on major fault lines and is prone to frequent earthquakes. Rescue teams were searching for survivors trapped in a 5-story collapsed building in a village some 30 kilometers from Elazig. One person was pulled alive from the rubble. Emergency staff and people waiting at the scene lit fires in the streets to stay warm in freezing temperatures. Sports centers, schools, and guest houses had been opened to accommodate quake victims in Malatya. The tremor was felt in several parts of eastern Turkey near the Iraqi and Syrian borders, according to the Turkish broadcaster NTV, adding that neighboring cities had mobilized rescue teams for the quake area. Meanwhile, survivors from the Turkish village of Sevrimtas described the deadly earthquake that has claimed at least more than 20 lives and has left many homeless. At least 30 people are still missing following the magnitude 6.8 quake on Friday night, which had its epicenter in the small town lakeside town of Sivris. Let's take a look.
4 çocuk değişimle beraberdik. Şükür yani bizde de herhangi bir şey yok. Komşularda bir zayiat vardı. Onlara işte hemen kendi imkanımıza çıktık. Onlara yardıma koştuk. Yaralı vardı. Bunları çıkardık. Ondan sonra 2 tanesi işte ne olduğu belli değil. Onları da götürdüler. Bilmiyoruz daha nasıl durumları nedir.
Dün gece işte biz televizyon izliyorduk o sırada. Birden deprem olduğunda. Çok fena sallandı. Ben de koltuktaydım, yere düştüm. Babam da işte uykusundan uyandı falan. Olduğumuz yerde yere çöktü. Ahırın olduğu kısma. Ondan sonra işte cama doğru gittik. Ondan sonra bir çıkış yolu bulduktan sonra evde kapıyı kırdık, dışarı çıktık. Ondan sonra da dışarı çıktığımızda da diğer evler yıkılmıştı.
The powerful quake killed more than 20 people, injured more than 1,000 in eastern Turkey. And as you can see here earlier, rescue teams were searching through the rubble of collapsed buildings for survivors on Saturday. Now, the Turkish government's Disaster and Emergency Management Agency said in a series of tweets early on Saturday that 5 people now have already been pulled alive from the rubble in eastern province of Elazig. State news agency Anadolu said among those found alive was a pregnant woman who was rescued 12 hours after the quake hit. At least 30 more people are missing following the magnitude 6.8 quake, which had its epicenter in Sivris in Elazig. Billions of locusts swarming through East Africa are the result of extreme weather swings and could prove catastrophic for a region still reeling from drought and deadly floods, according to experts. Take a look.
This region, two-thirds of the land within our region is what we call asal, arid and semi-arid area where pastoralism is the way of life. So if this is not dealt quickly and timely, this will have an effect, a really serious effect on the food security of the region.
The UN Humanitarian Office, or OCHA, said it released $10 million from its Central Emergency Response Fund to scale up its response to the devastating desert locust outbreak in East Africa. OCHA said the Horn of Africa has been hit by the worst invasion of desert locusts in 25 years, and it poses a threat to food security. Take a look.
The $10 million allocation from the Central Emergency Response Fund will go to UN Food and Agricultural Organization and fund an increase in pesticide aerial spraying operations, which, given the scale of the current swarms, is the only effective means to reduce the locust numbers. This desert locust is among the most dangerous migratory pests in the world. A single locust can travel 150 kilometers and eat its own weight in food, about 2 grams each day. A small swarm can consume the equivalent of food for 35,000 people in one day. They reproduce rapidly, and if left unchecked, the current numbers could grow 500 times by June. We are trying to address the situation before it becomes extremely bad. It's an outbreak that is covering East Africa, the Horn of Africa. It has also been noted in Southwest Asia and the Red Sea. It's the worst of its kind in 25 years for Ethiopia and Somalia. It is also the worst Kenya has seen for 70 years. The impacts in these countries are particularly acute as pasture and crops are being wiped out in communities that were already facing food shortages.
According to the UN official, the locust outbreak may further aggravate food shortages in the affected territories. He expressed the need to stop the outbreak, preventing it from spreading to more African countries. In other news, nearly 36 U.S. troops suffered traumatic brain injuries or concussion in this month's Iranian airstrike on a military base in Iraq, according to the Pentagon. President Donald Trump had initially said that no Americans were injured in the strike on the Ain al-Assad base in western Iraq on the night of January 7 to 8, although authorities later reported that 11 troops were indeed injured. Pentagon spokesman Jonathan Hoffman said that 17 of the victims had been initially transferred to Germany to receive treatment, 8 of whom arrived back in the U.S. on Friday. The air base, one of the largest in Iraq with 1,500 U.S. troops, making up the bulk of a coalition presence directly adjacent to thousands of Iraqi forces, was targeted in retaliation for the U.S. killing of top Iranian General Qasem Soleimani in a January 3 drone strike in Baghdad. Democratic lawmakers seized on the announcement to accuse President Trump of lying about the strike. Though he downplays these injuries as headaches, roughly half of all TBIs require surgery and can lead to lifelong disabilities, according to Congresswoman Debbie Wasserman Schultz of Florida. Meanwhile, Rhode Island Senator Jack Reed, the ranking member of the Armed Services Committee, called TBI a serious matter. It is not a headache, and it's plain wrong for President Trump to diminish their wounds. He owes them an apology, Reed said. And at a rally in New Hampshire, Joe Biden, a frontrunner to challenge President Trump to this year's election, said the president brushed off the troops' injuries. Biden, a former vice president, said, quote, "I find it quite frankly disgusting." Okay, we have an update now. The Chinese army deployed medical specialists Saturday to the epicenter of a spiraling viral outbreak that has killed 41 people and spread around the world as millions spent their normally festive Lunar New Year holiday under lockdown. Now, the country's most important celebration has been all but canceled for some 56 million people as authorities expanded travel bans in central Hubei province, now affecting 18 cities on Saturday when they should have been celebrating. Citizens of Wuhan stood in line at a pharmacy to buy masks from employees in full-body protective suits and surgical gloves. The World Health Organization on Thursday stopped short of declaring a global emergency, which would have prompted greater international cooperation, including possible trade and travel restrictions. Hong Kong's leader earlier, Carrie Lam, declared the situation an emergency in the city on Saturday, where 5 people now have tested positive for the virus so far, 4 of whom arrived via a newly built high-speed train terminal which connects with mainland China. And President Donald Trump's lawyers prepare to deliver his first full-throated defense Saturday in the Senate's historic impeachment trial after Democratic prosecutors spent 3 days making their case for the U.S. president's removal from office. Here are the highlights from day 1 to 4. Take a look.
The Senate will convene as a court of impeachment. There is no objection. The journal of proceedings of the trial are approved to date.
Hear ye, hear ye, hear ye. All persons are commanded to keep silent on pain of imprisonment while the Senate of the United States is sitting for the trial of the articles of impeachment exhibited by the House of Representatives against Donald John Trump, President of the United States.
We believe that once you hear those initial presentations, the only conclusion will be that the President has done absolutely nothing wrong.
I believe the most important decision in this case is the one you will make today. The most important question is the question you must answer today. Will the President and the American people get a fair trial?
I think it is appropriate at this point for me to admonish both the House managers and the President's counsel in equal terms to remember that they are addressing the world's greatest deliberative body. One reason it has earned that title is because its members avoid speaking in a manner and using language that is not conducive to civil discourse.
This order also constitutes the adjournment of the Senate.
Without objection, so ordered. The Senate is adjourned.
We are here today in this hallowed chamber, undertaking this solemn action for only the 3rd time in history because Donald J. Trump, the 45th President of the United States, has acted precisely as Hamilton and his contemporaries feared.
There are no close calls. The evidence shows that President Trump unlawfully withheld military assistance appropriated by Congress to aid our ally in order to extort that government into helping him with his re-election, then tried to cover it up when he got caught. The President's conduct is wrong. It is illegal. It is dangerous. And it captures the worst fears of our founders and the framers of the Constitution. Since President George Washington took office in 1789, no president has abused his power in this way.
The only person who stood to benefit from the abuse of office and solicitation of these investigations was Donald Trump, the 45th President of the United States.
The President's conduct that we outlined yesterday harmed our national security. That is without a doubt.
President Trump tried to cheat. He got caught, and then he worked hard to cover it up.
I implore you, give America a fair trial. Give America a fair trial.
she's worth it. Thank you.
A large industrial explosion killed at least 2 people in the U.S. city of Houston early Friday, shattering windows and damaging homes as shocked residents emerged to survey the destruction. Take a look.
First and foremost, I wanted to let you know that we do have confirmed fatalities. In this case, at least 2 confirmed fatalities. Houston Police Department has initiated a criminal investigation.
Firefighters, emergency services, and police rushed to the scene when a loud blast was heard across much of the Texan city at about 4:15 a.m. Officials said the explosion had ripped through a grinding and manufacturing business 18 miles northwest of downtown Houston. The property and surrounding premises were reduced to smoking, blackened wreckage with rubble strewn around and many windows and doors blasted out. After some hours, firefighters contained the blaze at the scene. It is still under investigation. And the news continues here on Eagle News. We'll be right back.
Tungkulin ng MTRC.
India, here in the Philippines, celebrated its 71st Republic Day held at Shangri-La in Makati City. Coinciding with the event is the start of the diplomatic relations between the Philippines and India. Let's listen in.
During President Kovind's state visit, both presidents used the term natural partners to describe our 2 countries. Indeed, as 2 vibrant democracies that believe in a rules-based international order and a free, open, and inclusive Indo-Pacific, we are indeed natural partners. To the good health of President Rodrigo Roa Duterte, to the prosperity of the Filipino and Indian nations, to the enduring friendship between our 2 countries and peoples. Mabuhay!
The Philippines and India have agreed to boost their cooperation in maritime security and defense modernization, as well as fighting terrorism, violent extremism, and other threats.
Both sides are also working to further strengthen our defense and security relationship. Indian Navy and Coast Guard ships regularly visit the Philippines. Filipino Armed Forces personnel have access to over 30 different military training programs in India. Next week, our Joint Defense Cooperation Committee will meet again, and tri-services talks will be held for the first time.
The Department of Trade and Industry said that in 2018, India was the 15th trading partner of the Philippines, 17th export market, and 14th import supplier. The total bilateral trade between the countries was valued at $2.37 billion. Chipmaker Qualcomm's president, Cristiano Amon, said that operators are still facing challenges in rolling out 5G coverage. Take a look.
We're very happy with 5G. It's actually one of the largest, opportunities in the history of our company. The company has been quite successful over the years in wireless, but I think 5G is probably the most significant opportunity because it's the time that 5G is no longer a technology exclusive to the telecommunication sectors, but because of its capabilities, it really expands into other industries. One of the biggest challenges that we have right now, and I think is a big challenge in countries like the United States, is an even bigger challenge in Europe, is for you to build 5G networks, you need to add new cell sites or new cell towers. And site acquisition in regions like the United States and Europe is the #1 obstacle and what's take more time for operators. China has been a great growth opportunity for Qualcomm, and as the partnership with the Chinese companies actually is increasing. I will argue that during the peak of the trade tensions, our collaboration with China actually increased.
VR Leo is a VR arcade kiosk company that is looking to change the way people use virtual reality outside their homes. And unlike many other companies with this same idea, VR Leo is looking to be a complete self-service machine, and that means there will be no paying employees to watch people play VR and clean the machines. Now, at the CES last week, Eagle News correspondent Brian Sonson got a chance to go hands-on with the company's products. Brian?
Although it draws similarities to the arcade games of old, VR or virtual reality games are taking the gaming world to another level. VR gaming has taken a leap in the past few decades in both popularity and innovation, but tech companies like VR Leo are pushing the boundaries for what's possible for the arcade game. CEO of VR Leo, Patty Liu, tells us her vision on VR gaming and the steps she's made to make the VR arcade kiosk truly self-sufficient.
VR has been in gaming for several years, but it's very, very trendy right now, and it's like a new generation. What I did is to bring the new generations to another easier steps, to make it like self-service in every location. This machine does not need any steps to help the players to play the games. They're going to be doing everything by themselves. And I have a feeling that it will be more popular than right now. We have the UV disinfectant functions, which is really, really like first in the world. Yes.
Oh, okay. Can you explain a little bit more in detail?
So what happened is when the buyer starts playing the games, so the head will drop down. The headset will drop down like those, and in the meanwhile, after they finish the game, the headset will go back up, and I have 4 UV lights turned on, and they will turn on for 28 seconds for the FDA requirement. Hygiene is one of the new things that we have to be focused for the VR.
Right. Okay. So I guess my last question is for you. What games do you have?
This software has 4 games right now, but the software itself can load up to 18 games. So then we can have games constantly renewing to attract players.
Oh, okay. Wow. Can we play?
Of course.
I guess there's nothing left to do but to play. A self-service VR arcade kiosk? Not sure when we'll have it in our neighborhood, but I'm definitely excited about it. But for now, I'll just keep playing the Oculus Rift. What's your favorite VR game? Let us know in the comments below.
Significance and benefit, just like the blood donation activity recently held in Taipei City, Taiwan. This is the 5th time that the Church of Christ members donate blood.
Ngayong araw, nagsasagawa po tayo ng blood donation activity dito po sa Taipei, kung saan pinangunahan po ito ng kapisahan ng SCAN. Kasama din po ang mga kapatid na galing po sa iba't ibang mga lokal.
Pang ilang beses na po ito naisagawa?
Ito po ay naisagawa na po ng pang 5 beses na po ito bale. Ang unang sinagawa po ay doon po sa dako po ng Chongli. At ang pangalawa po ay sinagawa sa Tainan. Pangatlo ay sa Taichung. At ang pangapat ay dito po noong 2018. At ngayon po ang panglima, 2020 po.
Bakit po ito isinasagawa ng Iglesia ni Cristo dito sa Taiwan?
Ang blood donation activity po kasi ay isa sa mga mahalagang aktibidad ng Iglesia na kung saan pinangungunahan po ng ating mga kapatid, maging ang mga kapisahan ng SCAN sapagkat bukod sa nagdudulot po ito ng magandang epekto sa ating katawan, ay tayo rin po ay nakakatulong sa ating komunidad. Lalong-lalo na po dito po sa bansang Taiwan, kung saan tayo po ay pansamantalang naninirahan, naninilbihan, Subalit, nakakatulong din po tayo sa mga mamayan ng mga Taiwanese po.
The activity, sponsored and spearheaded by SCAN, an organization inside the church, was able to contribute a lot to the aim of the government to promote the health benefits of donating blood by qualified donors and to the society.
Opo, nag-donate po ako ng dugo sa araw na ito.
Gano'ng karami po?
At ang binigay po nating dugo ay 250cc po.
Ano po yung mga reminders o mga paalala na dapat gawin bago mag-donate ng dugo na sinabi sa inyo?
Batay po sa kanilang mga tinagubilin po sa atin bago tayo magbigay ng dugo, ay kailangan po ay nasa proper condition po ang ating pangangatawan at masigla po. At syempre, lalong-lalo na po yung dapat yung tulog po natin ay yung proper po na 6 to 8 hours po na dapat nakatulog po tayo. Ayan po. At syempre po, kailangan
walang sakit po, no?
Opo, walang sakit, syempre. Yan nga po, tulad ng sinabi natin, proper condition po ang ating pangangatawan. Ayun po.
Ano naman po ang nadulot sa inyo nung pag-donate ng dugo, personally?
Ay, syempre po, lagi po nating nasa sa isip na pagka tayo po ay nagbibigay ng dugo sa ating kapwa-tao, ay napakahalagang bagay po nito at napaka-importante po, napakasarap sa pakiramdam na makapagbigay po tayo ng dugo sa ating kapwa. At syempre po, napakasarap po na napapalitan po yung ating dugo sa ating pangangatawan, na isa po sa napakahalagang bagay po nito.
Reporting from Taipei, Taiwan, I'm Keith Ong. I'm 1 with 25.
Thank you, Keith. The Parliament Secretary to the Leader of the Government in the House of Commons in Canada, His Excellency Kevin Lamoureux, made a courtesy call on Iglesia Ni Cristo Executive Minister Brother Eduardo Manalo on Tuesday, January 21. He expressed to the INC leader how the church had made a very positive impact in the world. A leading member of the Parliament of Canada representing Winnipeg North, Lamoureux cited the significant accomplishments of the Iglesia Ni Cristo that no other church organization, he said, in the world had done. He also noted that the INC's Aid to Humanity and the Worldwide Walk to Fight Poverty, which he had also joined in May of 2018, had made a mark in society as a whole.
Growing church. It's a church that has some amazing abilities. I would suggest you God-driven abilities that allow for things of this nature. You know, look around the world and say, where do we see church organizations that are able to accomplish the things that the Church of Christ has been able to accomplish? When you think of the Church of Christ, you think in terms of the individuals that attend the church and how they're fed spiritually. What I see is the results of that. So things such as the Aid for Humanity, which has actually gone right into the area in which I represent, where I've seen hundreds of families being provided both food and spiritual food also. You don't even have to be a member of the Church of Christ to see the benefits that the congregation delivers to the community. And that, I think, is probably the most powerful thing. It literally, because of the fine works and of the church, that we see the community better overall. And I see that as a very strong positive in Winnipeg North. And they make significant contributions, as I say, like Aid for Humanity. We've had walks, raising the sense of awareness of persons' responsibility to give back.
He also thanked the INC Executive Minister during his visit to the INC Museum on Tuesday morning, saying that this was an honor and a privilege that he really appreciated. Recalling his meeting with the INC Executive Minister, he said that he had a very positive exchange with Brother Eduardo Manalo.
Well, going into the meeting, I was a little bit nervous. I wasn't too sure how you would address Brother Eduardo. I find him to be a very humble man, and was very patient in listening to me talk, and we had I thought, a very positive exchange that we both feel very passionate about humanity in general. I found him to be exceptionally humble. And I can see why it is that he has a very strong passion to see the church do well. And I too want to see the church do well, not only because of the congregation, because of the positive impact it has on society as a whole.
Mr. Lamoureux said that he found the visit to the INC Museum very enlightening as he learned about the history of the phenomenal growth of the church that was first registered in the Philippines in July 2014. He also said that in the INC Museum tour, what stood out for him was how the church spread rapidly around the world and made its very significant contributions to help society.
In which I found was very enlightening. The Church of Christ in many ways has a history of growth and expansion and getting so many people engaged in what their spirituality and their purposes are, and to be able to go through the museum and listen to some very knowledgeable people that root the displays from the Bible and from individuals that have inspired so many is actually quite enjoyable. You learn a lot, and I think museums in general, that's the purpose of them. To be able to come out a little bit more knowledgeable than when you were when you entered in. So I think it's an excellent presentation. I feel a little bit more enlightened in terms of the Church of Christ and the contributions both in the past and today are making because as a result of it.
And that's the news for tonight. Join us online and here again on Monday evening. From all of us here at Eagle News, I'm Alma Angeles. We'll see you soon. I'm always one with 25.